Okay, so how did that go? What was that like? Having a chance to talk things through in smaller groups. What came up in your group?
We just
Don't bring a pad.
don't bring a pad to write things down. It won't be anything to do with what you're talking about. No, it was just covering what needs to be in the community and people eventually progressing, getting involved and doing other things in the community to make them feel better, like maybe having people that do art to come in and do groups and things. And then we looked at, like in Trieste, when you said about the 24/7 mental health, which is a really good idea because of having somewhere just to drop into rather than waiting on a waiting list for months and months. You know, just sometimes having someone there. I think it'll work. We don't really need a lot of money at the beginning because you could always have volunteers to talk to people. What else did we cover?
Including young people.
Yeah, definitely to include people of all ages. Priority. Obviously, there's not many teenagers or younger people in their 20s here today, so we need to include every age group in this to have somewhere to go, someone to talk to.
I think the other thing that came out was the thing about the importance of contributing and opportunities perhaps for volunteering and even being part of a social enterprise. And that's something Paul was saying in Trieste in Italy. That's something that it seems to be quite a strong feature of the service. And we were saying that there are social enterprises around, but they tend to concentrate on things like cafes, which is, I think, is a wonderful example of a social enterprise in Swindon. It's called the Olive Tree Cafe, and it's fantastic. But there are lots of other things that could be done, like having a cleaning service, or you were saying about bookbinding, and that was in an area where there was a university and there was a need for that. So it's about, you know, what's likely to be a need in the community. So I think that would be a very good aspect of anything in Eldine. And we were saying that there's a woman called Anne King who belongs to an organisation called Sequel, and her job within that organisation is to provide training and job opportunities, volunteering opportunities, as well as being part of a social enterprise. So we're linking with Anne, and she's very keen on what we're trying to do in Eldine. So it will take time, but hopefully we'll get there.
And in terms of the question we were setting, which is, you know, could developing the group as some kind of action learning set, would that help the process of delivering the...
I don't know, I need to ask if, I think perhaps that's something we need to talk about, isn't it? I don't know what other people think. I mean, it sounds a good way to go, but perhaps that's something we could...
Because my feeling was you need to connect the ambition of developing an Horizon Centre to this group of people who invested in it and feel that they will fight and defend it and help create it. You know, and I'm not sure, you know, it's an open question, but what's the process by which you kind of make sure that you connect up the two needs?
Yes.
You don't think
I mean,
so?
it sounds, I think it sounds really good.
Well, identifying
I just wouldn't
people
want to...
also who could be...
Yeah, and who would be the...
I just wouldn't want to talk for the...
Well, you, Anne King, you
the
did
group.
named... I mean, these people are naturally coming up, aren't they? You know, that we think the community centre, the pub, Betfred, Morrison's.
You can see the culture in Eldine now, can't you?
Charlie's Takeaway. But it's really important that at least in terms of the engagement process that we get the sense of having conversations and forming relationships with these important places and important people.
Yes, we were saying the environment's obviously really important to people, and within Eldine, unfortunately, what was probably once quite ahead of its time, I think, the shopping centre and the community centre, unfortunately, has been neglected and now is really run down and shabby. And there are opportunities there, but we need to perhaps get a collective voice.
Yeah. I do think that, because I mean, I know that the sense of community spirit is kind of faded out in a lot of areas as we've become more tuned into our computers and internet, stuff like that, and that we need to regenerate, recreate that sense of community, because it doesn't just, it's not there by itself, it needs to be constantly worked on and encouraged and supported and nourished. All right, thank you. Okay, who wants to go next?
Should we? Okay. The answer to the question is yes. We thought that was a good approach.
Move on.
2 further reflections that we spent more time talking about, really. One is community, a word we all use and mean different things, is different things to different people depending a lot of the time on the stage in their life you are. So for some people it's very geographical but for other people it can be, the other side of the country. Certainly it could be as far as Wootton Bassett. So depending on your interests and your independence.
Yeah, they call it communities of interest.
Yeah,
people have
exactly,
a community of
So it's not
No,
only,
no.
because for some people that's a priority, for other people it won't be. So if you want to, like young people may not actually be geographic. The other thing, that formal and informal organisation, we all struggle and fail to have a list of all the community organisations in an area, in a town, in a whatever. But so much stuff is informal and it isn't written down, and it would ruin it if it became formal. So we just need to remember that, I think, that having the perfect list doesn't actually answer anything.
It doesn't stay perfect very long, does it?
So it sounds more like an accounting process and a dynamic,
But
proactive
so
process. Yeah.
so you need a balance between all of those things. And the last one that we never got to the end of really, but was about evaluation and resources. Because the less resources you put in, the less pressure there is on evaluation, assessment, the amount of time spent administering what you're doing as opposed to doing it. And that is a problem that we all need to take a balance.
So is that a
about.
pitch for not giving any money then? That's a good way of pitching.
One thing definitely
Don't give us
came
any money, then we don't have to evaluate.
Kathleen, our group assumed it was a pitch for not doing any evaluation.
Well, I'm too cynical for
Oh, that's
that.
it.
Yeah, it's a pitch for not
Because,
giving
you know,
avoid the European Commission funding.
I don't think that's the only
but we also
That
count.
almost
You
destroyed
can,
my life when I worked in Tugwell.
so we're counting. We in our group had somebody got an allotment. We got into this thing about we were aware of social cooperatives in other parts which employ people with alcoholic and drugs problems and mental health issues, all the rest of it, who are selling organic salad leaves and herbs to all the local restaurants in a particular community and making good money out of it. So if you can relate an interest to a need and then find a group of people who can provide that opportunity, it ticks lots of boxes. But you're raising the money yourself. You're making the money, which can then be. And in the Italian model, the cooperatives support each other and the service. So you've got your own sources of cash, which you're not reliant on grants and contracts and all that kind of stuff that we all often get caught up in. And the contract changes, and you have to change to meet the needs of the contract, and you're a million miles from your mission. You just follow the funding. We've all been there. Anything else?
No.
Who next?
So our group at the back here, I think we started on with concern about that sort of interaction between people and systems and that sort of the frustration out of that, and the good news of where there is listening and hearing, and so really wanting to encourage that approach and pushing that forward. And also challenge how structurally you challenge the systems. There's a sort of both and how you get to do it, but a real sense in which, well, you've got to get on and do something that shows it works, and that's the positivity of this whole initiative, that it will slowly gather momentum and bring change. But there are some people like me who get very frustrated when you can't go straight to the top and bash somebody and say, come and look. We do have some of those interactions, and we need to seize those opportunities as well in parallel, and then all those things will slowly come together. We did talk about sort of mental health, and I have a bit of a hang-up with that word mental health, because it people, it stigmatises people or whatever, and I think it undermines some of the good work that is happening out there. And I was grateful for friends here who are sort of enlightening us in some of those ways. And so, however we badge this, I'm just concerned with that personally about that phrase, because I think people stay clear of it. But I mean, health and well-being is, you know, are good positive things we want to tap into.
I used emotional distress. I think.
Yes, emotional health or whatever.
Yeah. So it's not just physical,
mental
but
hospital and mental
however you cover it
illness.
without sort of stigmatising or saying, oh, that's not to do with me or something.
Language is so important.
Yeah. And just one thing, maybe a sort of Swindon effect is that, I mean, I'm not a Swindonian, but I'm here and I serve. But a lot of people for whom it isn't community, because they're, you know, their community's back in London or the North East or whatever, and people have come here for all sorts of different reasons. So there are some assumptions out there that because we share in the same geography, we are part of the same community. And actually, there are probably many people for whom they're still to feel part of community, and this kind of initiative will help build that. So we'll feel community, and community will do things which are good as well. So I don't think we can necessarily jump straight to that sort of, we've got a community that's out there, they just need to express it. I'm not saying that you have seen the main message from our group, that people are very encouraged by the initiative that's being taken and wanting to support it and enable it. Bit of a challenge about people's availability and time for volunteering is always a demand, and people have to decide which is for theirs when they're grandparenting or caring for a sick neighbour, in all those other important community, you know, the person things. But a great encouragement. Thank you.
Well, I'll try and sum up our group. We had a really good, interesting discussion, really, because of the background of everyone that was there. But I mean, I think we've covered everything that's kind of been said with other groups, and I think what really becomes clear is how we all recognise how the model of what's kind of been proposed has a great opportunity and potential, and fully behind that. I think key things that come up for us were person support in this situation, and not just those that may be the actual service user, but also the carer, and obviously family members as well, which is really all important. We talked about the communities of interest, because we kind of recognise, and I definitely recognise within my role, that sometimes for me to build the trust up with the service user or the community is very difficult, because they don't realise what the Health Watch Swindon is, or the potential of what it can be. And it's worth talking to me if you want to, as a patient or public, because we do have a really good role locally. But it's actually also recognising that locally that trust is there with that community group, that community interest going to the church, and that's very important, and that should never be forgotten. And, you know, I very much in my role try and establish as much things as I can, because I know that that's where the trust remains, and to getting the feedback. We talked about volunteers and utilising volunteers, particularly in a situation, because we're talking about generally knowledge of people within Swindon, knowing about the wonderful good services that happen, whether they are commissioned or whether they're voluntary or their service user group. But particularly when they're kind of commissioned, it's then talking about the resources behind that. Is always the next challenge, you know, let's tell everybody about it, but actually if we can't resource it, then it creates its own problem. So we're talking about that, and then obviously the accuracy of, you know, situations when someone maybe said, actually for support you could go to this place, but actually when that was followed through, that wasn't available in that right. So we looked at that. We also looked at, you know, the importance of making sure that, you know, moving forward with the steering group, etc., that it's recognising the important people to be within that group, because as well as being, you know, the importance of, you know, as the phrase we put that was told, which I've loved and written down, nothing for us without us. It's also kind of recognising the wonderful work that's done by all the health professionals that have done that, and maybe the restrictions or the boundaries or the work that they have to do and work within to, you know, to make sure that actually as we kind of develop something, the model going forward, it's all encompassing, and it, you know, it takes it from everywhere. So I think that's what we kind of summarised and did. I mean, there was loads of stuff. It was brilliant. I wish I'd recorded it, really, because it really helped me. Jargon, that was the last thing. Jargon, I think we touched on as well, you know. And I certainly think we're doing a project that starts next week. Nice plug. And again, people can come and join us for that. But actually, I'm now thinking all the material and all the jargon I've used, I wished I'd used something like person support, people support. And I think that's it, unless anyone's got anything else to add.
given the multisectoral bifurcation needs, refer to my PowerPoint. Yeah, it is true, isn't it? Yeah, language is so significant, so important, and to be inclusive. We had, was it for the people, by the people?
Yeah.
So we came back, which
Yeah.
is the other side of it. Nothing
Yeah, that's great.
about us without it. So yeah, I think that sense of where we start from. Okay. Anybody else got any comments they want to make that hasn't been raised before we break for lunch?
I think the important thing is that came out there is about how is this taken forward from today? And it's about
Very much
people
so.
that are here that are showing, but that should be this afternoon. We mustn't.
We don't want it just to be a nice day
No,
out
no,
for
it's got to be
everybody. It's
something
got to be,
tangible
it's the
that we take
next,
forward.
absolutely.
Okay, but we're coming on to that agenda in the
Uh-huh.
afternoon. Yeah.